Shri Radhe Govinda Gopala tera pyara naam hai Shri Radhe Govinda Gopala tera pyara naam hai Shri Radhe Govinda Gopala tera pyara naam hai
Mahila Mandali, Women's Arm, can we advise general viewing will be done after these organizations? The general public will view after the organizations, so please may you have your seats.
To some of the most extreme end. They had a wonderful tribute to Pandit, and I suspect that the tribute that they paid now, when he passed, is what the truth is and what they really feel. But 2 weeks ago, the self-same newspaper said some of the nastiest things about him that were untrue. But this family, and I've seen that firsthand, how troubled he was by these nasty things that were said. And it was through you, Indra, and the children that he found the strength to persevere. And I seen the love in this family that sustained him throughout his illness. And I will miss coming on Diwali night and had one night and spending long hours talking to him and to everyone there. And I miss poking fun at Pandit and his quiet, witty, knowing tolerance when I did so. And I miss his dignified calm in the face of turbulence. I miss the light in his eyes when an old Hindi song touches his heart. And he would even try to squeeze in Vindi's Hollywood, Bollywood Dreams, an old song just for himself. And sometimes he says, you see, I got them to change the stuff. And we'll all miss him for his unreservedly sharing of knowledge. And we miss him for his civility in uncompromising struggle. And we'll miss him for the courage that he displayed in personal and societal life. I have been very, very fortunate in my life to have met two persons. Dr. Chetty Jagan, I remember growing up in the village, young enough not to remember a word of what he spoke, but old enough to remember the excitement of him coming to the village everyone busy. The woman in the village cooking, my father who was a cynic, getting excited. One of the few times I see him get excited, listening to Chedi Jagan. And I got infected by the excitement too. Maybe it might have been the promise of the food that they serve afterwards. But my biggest achievement in life, I think my greatest accomplishment was to grow up and become a finance minister to a legend, an icon, Chedi Jagan. And the second person was reepu daman. As a young teenager, he too engendered the same sort of excitement when he came to the temple to read the Yaj. And what going there and listening to him and what differentiated him from so many others who preach the scripture was his interpretation and his dynamic way of relating not the rituals of our philosophy, of our scriptures, not the fatalism that some pundits often preach because of the belief in reincarnation. But the script, he sought the scripture out to distill the lessons, the philosophy. And he pointed out that our scriptures engendered people to take an active part in life, to change their own lives. His interpretation, his preaching of the scriptures is what stood out and inspired so many young people and so many who were in the struggle at that time to change things in this country. And then again, later growing up and working with him and becoming close to him was the second thing, as I said, in my life that stands out. I guess these two individuals, they imbued the PPP with a lot of their personal characters because they played such an important role in the formation of the party. They were never bigoted. They were broad-minded individuals. That is why our party today remains open to people of all races, to people of all religions. We have never ever, I grew up in the PPP, and I've never gone to an official meeting where people's race or religion were discussed as factors for mobilization or keeping them out of the party. And they went through a lot of the struggles. I heard Chandra when she spoke a bit about the struggles in the colonial era. And when the colonial masters tried to homogenize everyone by conversion, even to change names. But there was other types of assault against people of East Indian origin. It doesn't mean that there were not some brutal assaults against people of other origins, slaves, etc. But the Indians in particular, the British commissioned a study. And the study concluded that Indian people were rural, they didn't value education much, so it was not necessary to build schools in these rural communities for them. And what bothers me today is that we seem to have, in the new politics of Guyana, a resurgence in a hidden way of some of the same feeling. This country is important, and Pandit believed in that for all of the people of our country, regardless of their race and their religion. He believed that every child of every race and every religion should have equal opportunities. But recently, 38 persons were, because their names are of East Indian descent, were used in a case to say that the People's Progressive Party, because they're employed in the public service, is practicing discrimination. that we're giving people of Indian origin preferences. Now, a lot of those people have served over 30 years in the public service. Some joined the public service even when we were in the opposition. But the only reason their names were on that list that Luncheon is very familiar with, because he faced the brunt of it, is because of their origin, East Indian origin. What the message is, what is the message to people of East Indian origin? If you're PPP or PNC, if you're Christian, Hindu, or Muslim, if you're a sugar worker or a professional, if you're urban or rural, once you're of Indian origin, you should keep your children home. Don't send them to school. The same colonial message. Because if, heaven forbids, they become qualified and they get a job and the PPP is in office, then it has to be not because of their merits, but because of their race. That was the lesson of that whole episode. Today, the person who did that is a leader of one of our parties. It is also sad to note that even when we did not have democracy in Guyana, Chandra pointed out about Pandit being the deputy speaker in the period from 85 to 92, and even at other times. We had the deputy speaker. Today we have the largest single party in the parliament, and we can't have even the deputy speaker. Pandit was deeply pained by the crudity in parliament, departure from every parliamentary norm that is known. How can we can't just come here and look at him and talk about how wonderful he was, which we all know he was. How are we going to ensure that the things he fought for, that Chedi Jagan fought for, that every person in this land should be dignified and be treated in a dignified way regardless of their race or their religion, that we continue to maintain that? How do we do it? That's the only way we pay fitting tribute to this wonderful man who's lying here before us and who gave his life for struggles and for people. So we have work to do, and you have to be part of it. Don't sit down. If you sit down and you become indifferent, people are going to take what we earn through blood and sweat and tears, the freedom in this country from colonial rule, and the freedom to think and to talk and to walk this land again, because those freedoms were not always here. How do we preserve those freedoms? We need every one of you to think about that and be part of it. So, Indra, thank you, and thank everyone in the family. I wish to, on behalf of the people of this land, for giving us Pandit. He made such an important difference in all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, former President Dr. Bharat Jagdeo. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Vindya Prasad, the daughter of Pandit Reepu Daman Prasad, to come to the microphone and pay tribute to her father.
Excellency, President Donald Ramotar, former President Mr. Bharat, Mr. Samuel Hines, Speaker of the National Assembly, former opposition leader, to listen to the pundits who came before me, and even those on the other side of the religious line, when they mentioned the Bhagavad Gita, even the opposition, former opposition leader mentioned the Bhagavad Gita. I was hoping Uncle Roger would quote from the Bhagavad Gita that he really took Hinduism into the People's Progressive Party. But he did that. Clinton Collymore is a Hindu. And he's familiar with all of the things in the Gita, and he can quote for you too. My father used the Bhagavad Gita in every form and facet and dimension because he thought our religious scriptures were relevant to each and every one of us today. He taught his children that. We were not taught to accept everything as dogma. We were encouraged to research, encouraged to think. And my father has an institutional memory. It's still difficult for me to speak of him in the past tense. For me, he will remain alive. Alive because I am here. Alive because each one of my brothers and sisters, they're here. Alive because the Ghana Hindu Dharmic Sabha is here. Alive because so many of you have said such glowing things and played such overwhelming tributes today. Not only here, but daily, we have been reading on the social media, the calls have been pouring in, the people have been coming in, from the diaspora and beyond. They have come, they have shared, they have expressed, and they have all said one thing: he touched our lives, he changed our lives, he shaped our lives. And because of that, I have no doubt in my mind that his legacy will continue. I was working on his book, and I was always a little uncertain as to what to call this book of a man who straddled the religious and the political life. When I went to Parliament, the Speaker expressed that he had great expectation. And my last speech, he sent me a note. My father never saw that speech, but he did tell me that Mr. Lance Carberry called him and said, "Reep, you weren't there, but you sent your daughter, and that's as good as if you were there." I don't know what I said, but it was one day after he fell ill. And I just got up. I was not in the mood. I was not in the mindset, because I kept calling him from Parliament. Reverend Gilbert asked me, "What is wrong with you? You don't look like yourself. You look tense." And I said, "I don't know." He said, you will just be fine. Mrs. Gail Teixeira said to me, "When you get up, it will be fine." And you know, it was. I got up and I thought, what did Reepu Daman Prasad say? How would he say it? And I said it. I don't know what I said, how I said it, but I said it. I said it as he would, fearlessly and with conviction, because he taught us, if you think that there is injustice, if you feel that right is not being done, if you feel that the underprivileged is being trampled upon, if you feel that you can do something to help anyone, no matter how small it is, and no matter what the cost is to you, do it. And that is what I took with me. That is what I will keep with me. There's so many faces here, and to single out anyone, I would do an injustice to them and to him. He always told me, don't get yourself into trouble. Don't call any names. So I have learned. I continue to learn. We continue to be comforted by the fact that you came here. You stood with us when we needed, and you will continue to stand with us. That I know. Some of you didn't say anything because you couldn't. You were choked up. I don't even know how I'm able to talk to you. My brother and I were saying, could we hold out? But so many people, they were passing and we said, be strong. And so I'm finding that strength within me. And finding that reserve within me, because I think my father has displayed strength in his entire life. He faced every situation with courage, and he treated everyone with the utmost respect. He was never arrogant, but he had inherent humility. He never was too busy to listen to the child, the youth, my friends, those who work with me, those who learn from me as a teacher. They all have something or the other to tell me about Daddy and what he said to them, and maybe how he boosted their spirit, because he continued to do that. Maybe he could not go to all the yajnas anymore. Maybe he could not go to the Light and Breath of Guyana, but believe me, when he could have gone, he went. And he didn't only go, he spoke. He used to tell me, because 9 out of 10 times I would go to him, you speak. I said, but why would I speak and you're here? Better I stay home. And he said, no, speak, I'm not going to speak. I spoke. 9 out of 10 times he would speak after me. And he would have so much more to say after me, and I thought I covered it all. He would make you feel nice by saying, she speaks well. She's doing a good job. But you knew that you were nowhere near a matchless, articulate, eloquent speaker who took that gift, I wouldn't say a gift of God, a gift of speech blessed by Saraswati Mata wherever he went. Whether it was in Guyana, whether it was on the international scene, he took that gift with him. And wherever he went, he took Guyana with him. He was an ambassador for Guyana. Because I know we have the pictures, we have the reports, we have it all. And I've been working on his book, as I told you. Everywhere he went, he was always chosen to represent Guyana at the highest level from the time he got up to speak. He had such a magnetic personality. And that is why I know and I'm thankful and I'm humbled and I'm overwhelmed by your support, your compassion, your empathy, your love. I can speak volumes. And I can also say that my father's institutional memory would have allowed him to talk about you, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your lineage, because he knew you all. I have to try to learn your names, your lineage, like he has, and he did. But what I will do, and what I think I've started to do, is to stay in touch with you. Guyana, as many of you have said, has lost and will be poorer. But I would like to think that Guyana is richer because he's been here, because he's shared with you, because he's taught you, because he's left you with a message. He's left you with his teachings. And more than that, he's left you with the way he lived, because he didn't just say it, he walked the walk and walked tall. He always said to me, we live simply, we don't have much. I said, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you were honest, you had integrity, you had character, and that is what I will be very proud of as my father. That means more to me than anything else. Reepu Daman Prasad, as he was named so chosen by his father, means, as was said, defeating all negativity and all obstacles, and I think his life was that. He overcame them all. He stood tall. He made everyone proud of him. For us, there's a void in our lives. For us, it will be a loss that we will never recover from. Never. Yes, never. Never. But for us, our work has now begun. As a family, as a religious organization, as a people. Let us serve, let us work, and let us use the guidance of that Almighty One. He believed in respect for all faiths. He always said, Hinduism is not a dogma, it's not a static religion, it's a way of life. So I'd like to ask you, let it be a way of life. And as the song was sung here so beautifully from Bhakti Bhajan, I was listening to it with a smile. Ab Saupadaya is Jivanika, Sabhar Tumhare Hakumi, Sansar Tumhare Hakumi. Your hand, losses are in your hand, life is in your hand. Once we understand that, once we accept that, then we can never be poor, we can never be lost, and we will always have Reepu Daman Prasad with us. To everyone here, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And national figure. I want to reflect on his life as a father to his 6 children and the memories that we would have shared growing up with someone who spent most of his life giving his energies to the Hindu community and the people of Guyana. Of the 6 of us are here today. I will describe each of our relationships with Dad. My eldest sister, we called her Anne. Her real name is Yopati, and I know Dad didn't name her, so he was 20 when she was born because he took a pride in beautiful name. Your name is not beautiful, but during the early years, Anne would have worked with Daddy, helping him prepare his writings, radio recordings, and putting together his vast library of music. They have the same passion for music and shared favorites in Mukesh, Hemant, Tala. Anne is a role model as an elder sister. She made sure she visited him for his birthday. Every 16th of January, she would leave Canada and she would come to see her father. She would get him anything he needed and called on a regular basis. Daddy would stay with Anne when he visited Canada, and she and Walton made sure that his visits were perfect. My next sister, Aruna Reshma, I know Dad named her. We called her that, Lini. In the formative years of the Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, my sister Lini was the main producer of all the dance shows. She even got me to dance one year at the Farnham Playground during an annual Pagu Mela. I think over the years, I've managed to destroy all the evidence of that event. Daddy always had a special bond with Lini. After she migrated to Canada, he would worry whether she was okay, always referred to her as soft and delicate, and would advise her not to work too hard and let him know if she needed anything. He would always say, "I miss Lini. Just call her and make sure she's okay." My brother, Lokesh, we also call him Tony. My brother Tony is if you would have looked at the pictures on the screen, it's not me. My brother Tony is the splitting image of Daddy. Very handsome and humble. Daddy was always proud of how hard he worked and how simple he was. Tony liked watches, and every time Daddy would visit, he would take off his watch and give it to him. I remember Tony calling to say that his workmates from Guyana did not believe when he said he was reepu daman Prasad's son, and he might just need to take his birth certificate to work. All 6 of us were together last year. Tony reflects the humility and humbleness for his personified reepu daman Prasad. Over the last few days, as I reflected on Dad's life, I can see reepu daman Prasad in every one of us children. Vindhyavasini, fearless, dedicated, focused, and knows what she wants. From a child, she knew she was going to be a doctor. Like, since I was born, I knew when you were going to be a doctor. That was a decision she took early and made sure it was done. She got involved, like Winnie, in the cultural and production aspects of the activities of the Dharmic Sabha. She became a television personality, a strong advocate for Hinduism, and a voice to reckon with in fighting against child and alcohol abuse. She more recently got involved in politics, and I think this made Dad extremely, extremely happy. He left knowing that parts of his legacy will be intact. He would ask her what was happening in Parliament and engage her on her presentations. Bindi, like Daddy, as you would have seen, is a fantastic orator. She looked up to him in a special way, and besides being a father to her, he was her mentor. More recently, he would tell me, "I can't win in this house, you know. Bindi has a strong mind and inflexible on her terms." Between Saturday or early Sunday morning and now, and all the things that people would have told me about Dad, and all the things I would have read, this may have been the personality of a young reepu daman Prasad. That's the only thing I could come up with. But Dad loved Bindi. He was very, very proud of her. We were all very proud of her. And we know that, there was a special bond there because she was the one that he could live to in his more recent years when he was not ill. He was Bindi, make sure you say this, Bindi, make sure it's a daddy girl, So, but he always wanted to make his contribution. Samantini Trushala, the lawyer. Daddy himself had a tremendous knowledge of the legal workings, and so I think he was happy to finally have a lawyer in the family. We all knew that she was the brightest in the family. She would read a book in 45 minutes. That would take me a few hours. She was extremely articulate with her arguments, and in recent years, Dad enjoyed his conversations and debates with her. She was also the child that would show the love and attention he lived for. You have to ask a few times, but if you know my father, he would talk 24 hours if he had an audience. He called her Matbot, and she would rub his head, mash his feet, and make sure he was comfortable. Daddy would always be able to advise her on legal matters, and he would be right not 99% of the time, but 100% of the time. And he would have to let us know, I would write about what I was telling Samantha, and he enjoyed that. Samantha is very much like that when she articulates an issue. She's not loud but factual, convincing, a very calm person that is not riled up easily, unless I'm the one doing the riling up. Bishop Mayan Reepu Daman, that's me, the youngest of the six. I'm in business, something that never interests my dad. Daddy referred to me as an IT expert. I am a motor racing fanatic. I like to stay home. Compared to Vinny Samantha people, a relatively low profile. During the last few days of the week, I did not know Pandit had a son, or Bishop, boy, look how you grow big, All my aunties from Barbies that, they haven't seen me in a while. One day I was visiting our family home in Prashad Nagar. This was like a year and a half ago. And the doorbell rang. We got a bell and Daddy likes to know when his visitors are coming. When I opened the door, the fella said, "Who are you?" I quickly flipped it back to him, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Pandit's godson." I promptly replied, "I'm Pandit's son." I want to describe to you today also the Reepu Daman facade that no one here would know besides his children. And the best way would be to tell a few of my stories with Dad. He was really a loving and caring father, an exciting person to be around. It was 24/7 action if you were moving with Daddy. My mom is strict. Well, on the surface, I've gotten to know her a lot better since, and I know how to work her. She always expected everyone to be up at sunrise. So by 6 a.m. she would wake up everyone, and you'd have to come out of your bed. Dad and I would willingly comply and go downstairs. We would hop up on the little chair there for another hour while she upstairs fixing up everything. We'd sleep again. And this went on for years. Like I remember we had this chair and he would lie and I would lie in him and Mom would be, "Oh, that's it." And then we got, make a second, third, and go to it again. But that's the fun. And most of you, you would never seen that side of him. We always had early visitors. People that especially travel from far to visit Dad if they have problems. And they would depend on him to solve their issues. This most times ended up with us being late to school. With him, it was always to serve the people first. That's like a fact, He made extremely great family sacrifices. Today, when I look back at his life and the great things he has achieved, I would have to say it was worth it. Going on a road trip with Dad was always an adventure. In 1990, I went to 10 religious functions with Daddy, each lasting a week. There were 7-day yaj, and most were in Barbies. He was so in demand. We did this 10 weeks straight. I would cry to go. Mommy would say, he's gone. And I would go by Auntie Sheila, who's here today. And Auntie Sheila would look after me. You can't get a better salary roti than in Barbies. It's like impossible. And I would have so much family, Auntie Esther, Auntie Ruby, Auntie Jessie, and he would not have to worry. I would just be taken care of. On these trips, we would visit dozens of homes and have to have a meal each time, sometimes 7 or 8 times a day. We would eat everywhere we stopped. Somebody cooked. Pandit, I cook for you. I know you like this. We gotta eat. We drove up and down like every Sunday. The reading would be in the morning, and we would leave to come back home. On Monday, we would be heading up again for the first night events. This usually ended up in us speeding to catch the boat. Uncle Clement was by us last night, and he said, when I drive with Pandit, I'd be like, he's got one foot, he had an automatic car, he's got one foot up on the seat, and he's driving with the one foot. He's talking and he's going down the road, and he said, "Yeah, we can make the boat, don't worry, I learned to drive from Daddy at 9 years old. I sat in his lap and would steer while he operated the pedals. He told me stories when he was a high car, drive up. He was already 20s and how fast and good he was. I think here is where I got my interest in motor racing. When I got involved in motor racing, he was not happy. He was not happy at all. I remember my first ever event. It was in 2001 in the lap of honor motor racing. Before the race started, all the cars were wrong. Prime Minister Sam Hines at the lap of honor said, "Young Reeps, man is not too happy, you know." He said, "Keep an eye on you." I remember that like it was yesterday. Now he sat in the chair when I was fixing the car. He's not speaking. You don't want to hear nothing. You don't want nobody in the yard. You know. And I was running out of money because it was a little expensive thing and using all I got. And mommy told me she gave me a little small piece. She said, "Try, don't let your father know." That's 14 years ago. After that, he became a minister. I would continue to travel the length and breadth of Guyana with him. This time it was not for religious or political purposes, but it was national issues mainly in the agriculture sector. That had his origins with the people, and he took that to government with him. He would go out in the fields and meet the farmers and was very energetic as Minister of Agriculture. He took me in Mahaika and my pony where there were big floods. He spent days there and would visit everyone he knew in the area. We would sit in the flood homes and we would eat. They would be just like barbecues all over again except plain water. But we got every curry you could think about and every roti, you know. Well taken care of. He was loved everywhere he went. Everyone knew his care for them and that it came from his heart. Reepu Daman Prasad was humble, compassionate, straightforward and honest. He treated everyone equally, respected the people he worked with. Respected the people he worked and engaged with, and made doing the right thing his mode of operation. He believed there was one God. I had this conversation many times with Danny. He believed there was one God, but there were many paths to that God. He respected all religions. Though he was a well-learned pundit, he was never fanatical. He was practical and he was realistic. The more I think about it, I have used my father's principles in business, and I practice them every day of my life. And I think I only figured that out in these last few days. Recently, every time he would have to go somewhere, one of us would have to go with him. He would have problems walking, but he would want to be strong because on the inside he was fully alive. Everything was there. Sometimes he's not feeling well, and somebody comes up to him and they say, "Hi, how are you doing?" He said, "All right, but we're trying to get somewhere to sit down." So I said, "Dad, I think that person, them." He said, "Yes, it's so and so, mother so and so, sister," and he knows their whole history intact. It's indescribable. I remember when I was trying to start my first business, I was trying to get a loan from the bank. Of course, the banks only lend you money if you have money. So I decided to ask my mom if it was possible to use the transport for our home to secure this loan. This was the kind of question I would have to work with mommy and see if she could get it approved. Dad's answer was, "If the business fails, you will need somewhere to live." He had a fantastic sense of humor, and that was the end of the transport issue. He always used to give a joke, and I know all his godchildren will have heard it before. He would say, "The husbands are the head of the house. That is undeniable, but the wife is the neck. Where the neck goes, the head will have to follow." I think many times my mom was a good neck. She's a strong and capable person. With my dad's busy schedule, she did many things in our home that would typically be considered a man's job. I have two daughters, they're here today, Avasa and Kayla Janvi. Dad absolutely loved them. He had a more traditional relationship with them. He wanted to see them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He had no interest in going anywhere. He just wanted them for himself, so that they could play with their after. He got with them the type of relationship his early religious or political career did not allow him to have with us. And for that, I'm so happy. Daddy loved my wife Tanya. She would spend hours taking the children to see him. He would show her his library, his pictures, all his speeches, and she would equally enjoy his company, or she probably, didn't have another choice. But, Daddy was very proud of, if you look at his library, you look at some of the pictures we tried to put on the screens, he was very proud, especially in the last years of, the things he wanted us to know, he wanted to share. We always talked about a book for Dad for years, and it's always bits and pieces, but the stories are the best and funny, and they make me happy. In the last 2 years, I had many discussions on politics with Daddy. It was all we talked about. I found myself being in the private sector and engaging in different grouping. I had many questions for him and ideas of my own. I would engage him and he would listen. He would agree with everything I had to say. It would always end with, but you should also consider. And he would have another angle, and that could many times lead me to rethink my original position. Dad operated in a spirit of compromise. He was a reasonable person. He understood hardship. He came from humble beginnings and comprehended concepts like living within your means and everyone deserving a fighting chance. Never hang your hat where your hand can't reach. That was, when I was getting too aggressive, he would say, don't hang your hat where your hand can't reach. And I would understand right away where he was coming from. He was simple. I knew that he would live his entire life with 300 Champs-Élysées Street for Schrodninger. Never had any interest in anything material. He didn't care. He didn't care about material things. He never cared about money. He just wanted to be with religion, with politics. In our talks, he would always emphasize that you need to know who you are and where you came from, and then you will know where you're going. He was always clear on who he was. I'm a Hindu, I'm a Guyanese, I'm PPP. He said the three are linked, cannot be separated, have to be taken into consideration when making any decision.
The President has had a long relationship in the PPP with Pandit Ripu Daman Prasad. They've been comrades in the struggle. The PPP has had their opportunity to pay their respects today, as a visit to Freedom House was done at the request of the party. But President Ramatar wears the hat today of being the President of the country. And I now ask him to come to the microphone and speak as President Ramatar on his relationship with Pandit Ripu Daman Prasad.
Members of the Cabinet, former President Bharat Jagdeo, members of the family, the diplomatic corps, all the religious leaders, distinguished comrades and friends all. Much have already been said about Pandit Ripu Daman Prasad since his passing last Sunday morning. Here was a comrade who was deeply loved by our party, by our government, and by the Guyanese people of all walks of life. Although he fought tenaciously against colonialism, for democracy and in defense of fundamental rights, he took a stand. Yet today, in passing, we can say that he had no personal enemies. And that is a great achievement for a man who took a stand on one side. In fact, we had a lot of conversation over the years. And I remember once he was telling me about one of the people in the PNC that he had liked. And he said to me, I could trust him with anything. I will allow him to represent me in anything. I know he won't do me harm, except if it's politics. I know that if his party takes a decision, I can trust me with that one. But he had, as I said, no personal enemy. What is it that came together to make such a personality of a person that we are talking with? What form his political and his philosophical outlook? Reep, as was said here, already was born in a logie on the Diamond Sugar Estate. It was a difficult time internationally, a difficult time in the Caribbean, and a difficult time in Guyana. In 1936, the world was just coming out of a terrible depression, and there was famine in the Caribbean. Most of our economy was structured on sugar, and the price of sugar had fallen. And the misery and the poverty that existed have been spoken about, and there was uprising in the whole region. It was in that period that gave life and birth to trade unionism in the Caribbean. Indeed, Professor Macmillan, in his book published in that time, titled Warning from the West Indies, wrote, "A study of the West Indies is necessarily a study in poverty." That was the kind of conditions that gave rise, in which Comrade reepu daman was born. In that period, you will remember also, in our country, after the Critchlow period, there was no other trade union, and then there was this growth in the 1930s. And the sugar workers became unionized after the fight at Lenora. That forced the British to have a commission, the Moyne Commission, and they looked at what was happening in Guyana. And they found it so, the report was so devastating that the British did not release that report until after the war in 1945, because they believed that Germany would have used it against the British because of the kind of poverty that existed in Guyana. Reep was only 12 years old when the Edmore martyrs occurred, and obviously, coming from a sugar background and a sugar estate, it must have affected him greatly. He was 14 years old when the PDP was formed, and he joined the party at a very young age. He was involved in the 1957 campaign of the party. He had already developed a lot of popularity on the east bank of the Demerara, and he became a member of the General Council of the PDP in 1958 at the age of 22. It shows you the caliber of the person that we are talking with. He's not been in the party for 50 years. He has been in the leadership of the party for more than 50 years. And I think that that itself is an example for young people to look at, to take an interest in what is taking place in our country, and to get involved in the affairs of our state. Coming immediately after the election of 1957, he was highly recognized, and he was a strong contender for the East Bank constituency in 1961 elections. And I suspect that there must have been a very big discussion in the party because Ranjit Chandy Singh became the candidate. But Reep was a strong contender, and from the East Bank, many of our supporters were disappointed. However, he came into the parliament in 1964. Robert, I think now you have taken the mantle of being the longest living serving member of parliament in our country. You've taken over from Reep. Congratulations. And he told me a lot in our many conversations that we had about that period. And I want to say that he identified Colonel Ashton Chase as a man who guided him in that early period in the National Assembly and advised him. And he used to tell me about the fantastic speeches that he heard from, of course, Cherry Dragon and Forbes Burnham, but also he spoke about Fenton Ramsahoy. He seems to have liked his style a lot. And he spoke about C.R. Jacobs, spoke about Winifred Gaskin and how he looked forward to the debate with C.D. Nunes and Winifred Gaskin in that period of time. In this period, Reep's reputation as a pundit was also growing, and he became the General Secretary of the Mahasabha. But as has been said here over and over, Reep could not have been bought, Reep could not have been threatened, and he therefore had to be removed if they were to take control of the Mahasabha, and he was removed. And it was a difficult time, and he and I spoke about that on many, many occasions. And he told me that he would not have survived without the party, and many, many other people. One who I remember very well is Ali Bakshi's father, who he said helped him tremendously on the Essequibo coast in those difficult times. Reep was criticized over and over, particularly in the period when anti-communism was a big aspect of our politics. How could he be associated with Jagan, he a man of God? But for him, as was said again earlier, there was absolutely no contradiction in this. I think he saw the party as the vehicle in which he lived out his religious convictions, because he saw the party as standing fundamentally for the same things that he believed in, and he saw that he can make a contribution to the development of our country, not only in the religious and cultural field, but in politics, in economics, and other. That they took a decision that would break off the talks. Cherry, of course, wasn't convinced, but he had lost that vote in the executive. And as we were leaving the meeting, I heard him say, "Rick, I want to see you." And they went into his little office at the back. And when Pandit came out, he and I already had a very good relationship. I said, "What did Chief tell the Pandit?" He said, "Don't tell anybody, you know. Don't tell anybody." He told me they are very emotional now. Keep the talks going for another week and we will see. Reep was the only person that he would have trusted in doing that, because Reep was a great, great negotiator. He was a fantastic. I sat with him, myself, Roger and him, sat for days, hours, with Oscar Clark and Carberry and the comrade who used to be the Elections Commission. But we talked for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes I used to get so tired that we're not getting anywhere. But read any little thing we saw as hope and kept us going in that period from 1997 to 2001, when we were engaged in a really intense discussion. And that also served a good purpose, I think, too, because it made us know our opponents of the opposite end. It made us appreciate their concerns as well, and their fears, and how we try to deal with those things as we try to move our country forward. And much more of that, I think, is needed at this particular time, when we see the big instrument to try to damage the budget that we think can serve the interests of the people of our country. Comrades, we will always have to also remember his contribution, not only in the religious and the cultural field, but Reep was a showman. He brought a lot of artists in this country. Mohammed Rafi, Mukesh, Lata Mangeshkar, Shahrukh Khan, and he had promoted from a very, very young age. He also developed he became a fantastic orator. And his speaking in Parliament was tremendous to listen to the years I spent with him. And I have heard him not only in the Parliament, but on the street corners. And Reed never had a prepared speech. He could walk into the National Assembly and pick up what was going on and immediately stand up and make a speech at any time. And that was the command that he had and the knowledge, the vast knowledge that he had in the National Assembly. And in the same thing in the street corners, I have had the opportunity to speak with him at several such meetings. But Parliament was the place that he loved. And how he upheld the traditions of the Parliament, how he saw that as being important. And at a time when the PPP was reduced to only 8 members in the National Assembly, all the members had to take on additional duties, and Reed took on agriculture and law. And in law in particular, I think that his origins and his poverty that he started out in robbed our country of what would probably have been the best constitutional lawyer that this country would have ever produced. Because he really loved the law. And he quoted some of our comrades in the party who were lawyers. Sometimes used to get annoyed with me because even when they pronounce on something, I want to check it back with Reed. Because I have never known him on constitutional law to ever have been wrong in dealing with these things. And I'm sure you benefited a lot from this vast knowledge that he had of the law. He held his own in any debate, and he, of course, was one of our principal speakers at any national debate that we've had. That is why, in coming to government in 1992, he was so enthusiastic because many of the things that he fought for and many of the things that made him who he was, his religious convictions, he was seeing him having an opportunity to live it out. And he really did work. Even when he had nothing to give, his presence was important. And in the middle of the night, he will go to the preach. Roger mentioned just now in his presentation that very shortly after we got into the government in 1992, the sea defenses in Essequibo collapsed. And Reed went there to see what was happening, even to be only in solidarity with people. As I said, his love was Parliament, and I hope that those who today of managing the assembly will recall how many Guyanese, how many patriots like Reed fought to make the assembly a really democratic assembly and where the traditions of Parliament would be upheld. Unfortunately, we're seeing many of that. As minister in the government, also under when he had in charge of the Parliament, he brought back the Hansards when he was head of the House. He was important. We didn't have Hansards in the Parliament for a very long time before 1992. He saw to it that those things were returned. I remember being present in many debates with him and Colonialism Jagan when Colonialism was arguing that it was important to set up the committees of the National Assembly, because he said it was in the committees in the National Assembly that we can engage the opposition and broaden the base of the government. And he insisted on REEP to work to establish these committees in the National Assembly, which was done. Unfortunately, Colonialism didn't live to see that, but REEP eventually saw it through when we established these committees to try to improve and broaden our consultations with the opposition. Because that was always a concern of broadening our consultation. And that is why I was happy that our Minister of Finance in this last budget debate showed that in the budget that we have now, we took a lot of the ideas from the manifestos of the two opposition parties in there. Why they will cut it now would be a great mystery for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that all of us will have an opportunity, and I hope that we create the opportunity where we can talk more about the life of reepu daman Prasad. Because it was such a rich life that I think his ideas and his time are inexhaustible, and we will constantly learn from them. I hope that we will try to gather many of his speeches. He didn't do much writing. He was more of a speaker. He was the communicator more by words than by writing. But I think there are a lot of his speeches in Parliament that are there, and we should try to gather them so that future generation can know the kind and the caliber of a person that was produced by Guyana and by the People's Progressive Party in reepu daman Prasad. Rest in peace, comrade. You have done, your job has been well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, President Donald Ramatar. I ask you all to please take your seats. May I ask you all to please take your seats. We will continue this program in a very orderly fashion, and everyone will get an opportunity. First 3 rows.
मेरे